Alright, hello everyone, welcome back to Freedom Alternative. I am here with Kurosh, Kurosh, and we're here to talk about generalized Jew hatred. And we're going to start our conversation from an article from Heatst, I think it's the pronunciation, and about the latest anti-Semitic SJW crusade against the front actress of the Wonder Woman's franchise series. Apparently, a female-fronted TV show or movie or whatever is good until the actresses happen to be Zionists. So yeah, your word.
I just want to say that we are now so deep into social justice that being unapologetically Jewish is now racist.
How the hell did we get here?
It's amazing to me. I know I shouldn't be surprised because leftists and liberals hate Jews by definition. But I'm still surprised. I don't know.
Yeah, it is really surprising. I mean, in this article that we mentioned, at the end of it, it says this kind of dog whistle anti-Semitism is popular with SJWs. It's not necessarily dog whistle. I mean, the SJWs and the liberals and generally the wider left,
They've hated Jews for a long, long time.
absolutely, and not only that, but they usually accuse us conservatives of dog whistling racism or dog whistling xenophobia and whatnot.
Misogyny trends and Islamophobia intensifies.
Yeah, they always accuse us, whereas in general, when it comes to actual hatred, we've always kind of see it from the wider left, and anti-Semitism is one of those xenophobias that, to me at least, they don't make any sense. I mean, I can understand, even though I don't approve, I can understand why someone ends up hating black people or Negroes. I can understand why someone ends up hating Arabs. I genuinely understand, even though I don't necessarily approve, all sorts of xenophobias and hatreds and whatnot. But I really don't understand anti-Semitism. I really don't understand why so many people, including very smart people, mind you, end up hating Jews, because I can understand why less intelligent people may end up hating Jews. I mean, they look on the, I don't know, let's say the ethnicity of most of the Politburo in the Soviet Union. Yes, most of them were Jewish. So I can understand why less intelligent people end up hating Jews, but I don't understand why smart people end up hating Jews, and I definitely don't understand why allegedly the progressive, humanist, caring left continues to hate Jews. I mean, it made some sense in the 30s when being a fascist was being progressive, but today, why?
Some time ago, I read an article by Dennis Prager that a friend of mine had sent to me. A friend of mine back in Canada, who is really actually conservative Christian.
And do you still have those in Canada? I thought they were extinct species.
He's one of my best friends too, and he had sent me a sheet by Dennis Prager, and in it, Dennis Prager had offered his explanation as to why leftists hate Western civilization. And the explanation that he offered, which I think is probably about the explanation that I'm ever going to hear, is that leftists and liberals hate standards. And it seems fairly reasonable to me, because you can see it in a lot of what they do. Like, they want to eliminate the grading system. You know, now, like, some of them are saying that correcting bad grammar is racist. Like, the list goes on and on and on. And so, like, when I read that article, like, the idea that the reason why leftists hate the West so much is because they hate standards. I mean, I don't know how true that is. I don't know how much weight it has, but it's a pretty good explanation. And the reason why I bring this up, the way that this relates to, irrational hatred against Jews, is that a lot of Jewish culture is very, very, very heavily based on standards. Like, heavily so. Like, in Judaic culture, when a child, turns 13 years old, you go through a rite of passage, and then have, either a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah, whether it's a boy or a girl. And
they have separate standards by sex? Anyway, carry on.
Upon having the bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah and having turned 13 years old, that, by Western standards, that child, because technically, in our cultures, you're a child until you're 18 years old.
Or 26 if we are to listen to Obama.
Yeah.
You can be on your parents' insurance till you turn 26.
Absolutely fucking amazing.
And in Europe, a youth is considered between the ages of 14 and 36, according to the European Union. So yeah, anyway, carry on. I'm sorry for interrupting.
So in Judaic culture, when you turn 13 and you've had your rite of passage and you had the celebration, because the bar or bat mitzvah is a celebration of having gone through the rite of passage and having become an adult. You are an adult now. So now at age 13, you are now responsible and you are held accountable for absolutely everything that you do. And so this is going to produce a mentality of people who are very responsible. And so you get, like, in Judaic and Jewish culture, you get people who are very high achieving, who go into science, technology, engineering, mathematics, who go into these areas of knowledge and study where they contribute to and benefit the knowledge base of human civilization. And so they don't necessarily hold other people up to that standard, because, I think that, a lot of people would say that that's kind of unfair to hold other people up to the standards that you hold to yourself to. And so, that's a standard that Jews hold for themselves. But a lot of other people, particularly leftists, are just so uncomfortable with the idea of being held up to a standard, with the idea of being held accountable for their own actions, that they project their own insecurities and project their own self-hatred, really, is what onto people who have standards and live up to those standards. And one of the cultures where standards are absolutely positively an issue is Jewish culture. And another one is, Chinese and Korean culture, because now we're seeing in, about a year ago, I read an article about a university in California, I think it was in San Francisco, where now
they're actively discriminated against Asian students because they're too achieving.
That's right, yeah. So I think
it had to be the UCLA, because those are usually the most politically correct of the bunch.
I don't remember which university it was. It was in California somewhere. And
yeah, probably either UCLA or somewhere in San Francisco. I don't remember exactly. But I think that the hatred of standards has a major contributing factor to why so many people, not just, many stupid people, of course, but also many smart people, guys like Noam Chomsky. And I'm not gonna say bad things about Noam Chomsky, because he is a smart guy, and he.
Well, we don't think Noam Chomsky is stupid. We just think he's wrong.
Right. Yes. Exactly. And so, I think that has a major, a major role to play in it, is the hatred of standards.
But that's a very interesting thing, and I never thought about it this way, but as you were speaking, I was thinking, oh my god, we used to have that too in the West, or in Europe, whatever. I mean, it's in England, the age of criminal responsibility is still 10, to this day, yes, and every single country in Europe has had, or some of them still do, like this country. In this country, the age of criminal responsibility is 14. Although admittedly is one of the lowest in Europe these days. I mean, most of the former Western Bloc have an age of criminal responsibility at 16 or 17. But they used to have 12, 13, 14, 11, 10. This used to be the case for most of Europe's history up until the rise of the hardline left around the early 20th century, around the time when around the early 20th century, one by one, most countries, especially in the former Western Bloc, started renouncing their standards, or at the very least loosening them by quite a wide margin. And that's around the time when lots of the declining things, especially in cultural terms, started occurring. So the left-wing hatred for standards is self-evident, and I know. Yeah, and I know the article you're referring to about Dennis Prager, because I read it and I was like, oh my god, he's right on point. Now, I don't always agree with Dennis Prager. For those of you who don't know, Dennis Prager is the guy who has Prager University, and his channel is like 90% of the time, 9 out of 10 times correct, and 1 out of 10 completely bonkers. So we don't worship Dennis Prager around here, but he's most of the times correct, and he is correct with this one.
This is actually something that I've noticed about the difference between conservatism and liberalism. Conservatives and liberals is that when somebody from one of the particular camps, from one of the particular thought processes attacks someone, whether it's in the same
when we don't like something, we just say we disagree. We don't try to destroy the man.
That's right.
Yeah, leftists eviscerate anyone who does not go toe-to-toe 110% with the party line.
Conservatives attack ideas, liberals attack people.
Basically. And this is exactly what is happening here with Wonder Woman. I mean, otherwise, she has quite a few progressive creds. What's her name? Gal Gadot, I think it is, right? Yes. So most of the time she used to be liked by the progressives until they found out that she's a Zionist, which come on, she's an Israeli citizen. Of course she's a Zionist. Hell, we're Zionists and we're not Yes, well, we're not Israeli citizens, we're not Jews, and in fact we consider circumcision to be barbaric. So, we're not particularly 150% in love with Jews. But nevertheless, we do believe that Israel not only should exist, but has every right to exist, just like Romania has every right to exist, just like France has every right to exist, just like Germany. With Germany.
AL-Mania
Yeah.
stopped being cool when Merkel got elected a second time.
Yeah.
The second time she got elected.
But nevertheless, Germany still has a right to exist. Now, whether they will fight to preserve and exercise that right or not is a different story, and yes, it is highly doubtful, especially if they vote CDU a third time. Anyway, back to this. She had Gal Gadot had progressive creds for most of the time, until they found out that she disagrees with one aspect of the wider left. That is to say, she actually likes Israel. She actually thinks Hamas is a terrorist organization, like any other normal person. She actually holds positions that, surprisingly enough, have become partisan positions. There was a time when Hamas being a a terrorist organization was not a conservative issue. It was a normal thing. Just like you acknowledge that this mouse is black with a bit of silver on it. It's not a
It's not a point for discussion.
Yeah, there shouldn't be a point for discussion, but for some reason, and the reason is probably because the left has gone further to the far left than it used to be, it's now a point of contention whether Hamas is a terrorist organization or not. And because of that aspect, now Gal Gadot is in trouble. And what's really interesting is that we don't see the media being fired up on the issue. When the Ghostbusters failure started unfolding right in front of our eyes, every single media outlet out there that leans to the left, that is to say, almost all of the media, yeah, they started whining that, oh my God, it's institutionalized misogyny and whatnot, and a bunch of trolls on the internet hating them because they're women, which was not true, as the market has proven. The movie flopped as expected, and this time the leftists genuinely do pull an organized brigading over this lady, Gal Gadot, for being an Israeli Zionist. So they actually do hate her for her identity. And the media is cricket.
In defense of leftists, God, I would never thought I would say that. In defense of leftists, at the very least, they are actually attacking this woman's ideas. Retarded as they may be, they're still attacking somebody's ideas. You gotta give them that.
But they're moving the goalposts, don't they? I mean, they wanted a successful female-fronted movie. Well, here's your successful female-fronted movie, and now now they're moving the goalpost. Oh, we can't have this one because it's not the right kind of female.
And she's not the right kind of strong.
Yeah.
This is a woman who rose through the ranks of the IDF, okay, the Israeli Defense Forces, in, a supposedly patriarchal country, which, officially has on paper a supposedly patriarchal religion. And here is a woman who rose through the ranks of the Israel Defense Forces and eventually became not only a high-ranking military official, but actually became a high-ranking military teacher and trainer. But
Well, in fairness, Judaism is not necessarily patriarchal. I mean, come on, you're only Jewish if your mother's Jewish.
let's not let facts get in the way of some good old-fashioned hatred.
Although, to be fair, I think the Jews had it right with this one. I mean, considering that a significant chunk of women are whoring around, it does make sense, especially when you're, I don't know, let's say 2000 BC, to rely on what you know for sure. I mean, this child came out of that woman. We've all seen it, so therefore... Yeah, you can't really be sure about the father. I mean, you can now, thanks to DNA, but that's, 20, 30 years old invention?
Well, the invention, yeah.
Yeah, but paternity tests have been around for no more than 30 years, tops. Probably even less than that. So, for the last 6,000 years since Judaism has been around, it was a fair standard. We know that the child came out of that woman, so that is the mother for sure. So in that regard, they have it right. But then again, if they were genuinely patriarchs, they might have set things up slightly different, wouldn't they?
If they were genuinely patriarchal, like, for one thing, among others, they would have set it up such that the child inherited the father's religion and not the mother's. The testimony from a woman was worth less than the testimony of a man, and a woman received less of an inheritance from her family than a man would. If only there were such a religion in this world that worked that way.
You mean the religion of special needs, don't you? Now, in fairness, with the religion of special needs, yes, there are almost everything what you said is true. Though, admittedly, there are trade-offs to that work to the women's advantage.
There's no such thing as a perfect system, but
yeah, and not only that, but there is no such thing as a 100% oppressive system or a 100% liberative or liberationist system. Because, for instance, in the religion of special needs, of course we mean Islam, but, we don't want to use the I word too much because, We don't know. We want to share this on Halal Book, formerly known as Facebook.
Misogyny trends and Islamophobia intensifies.
But anyway, in the religion of special needs, and it's interesting. I mean, the leftists like to defend Islam, except when they probably should. For instance, they say that in Islam, women cannot divorce whenever they please, which is actually not true. But it's the leftists who perpetrate this lie, because no, women can divorce whenever they please in the religion of special needs. They just don't get their mehriye and nafaka with them. So that's another leftist lie. But when it comes to Islam actually being crap, such as sometimes they treat women like crap to the detriment, to the advantage of some men, not all men, but to the advantage of some men. That's when they suddenly forget about that and they start remembering, or they start deflecting. Oh my God, but crusades, as if the crusades have anything to do with how Islam generally behaves, and has been behaving for 1,400 years, something to that effect. So yeah, what's it? So we've pinned it on the hatred of standards. Jews have standards, leftists don't. So obviously they hate people who have standards, and Jews are just one of the groups. Another group is generally white Christian men who tend to have standards. They tend to adhere to some sort of code of honor. Either it's a religion or maybe not. I mean, I'm not a Christian, but I do have my own code of honor. And as a result, I'm not liked by the leftists for that. Same goes with you. You're not a white Christian man, but you do have your own code of honor. Therefore, the leftists tend to dislike you, and that's why Halal Book keeps hiding your comments. For instance,
they've been doing it very often for quite some time now.
Well, the more you get into the evil hole of right-wing thought, the more Halal Book tends to make you a target. But is hatred of standards enough to explain the general disdain that leftists show, not just for Israeli citizens or just for Zionists, but generally
for Western civilization?
I would dare to say go as far as to say the Judeo-Christian culture, because that's what we're talking about. After all, part of European/Western culture is part of it is Judeo-Christian, and part of it, of course, is Roman and Greek, mostly secular. Yeah, but they tend to attack for the most part the Judeo-Christian part. Although lately they started attacking the secular elements of it as well, because for instance, there was, I think it was Slate.com, who said that the biggest crime doctors commit is assigning the genders of babies.
I haven't seen that, but I believe it. Yeah. That sounds like a very believable news article. I don't know if hatred of standards can account for the entirety of leftist hatred for Jews and for Western civilization. I don't think it does. I don't think that it's the entirety of the reason. For sure, there are other factors involved. Now, exactly what they are, I don't know. But one thing, because another thing that leftists absolutely, utterly hate is Israel's existence. They utterly hate the fact that Israel exists. And so, I mean, as we say, like, not only can Israel exist, but it absolutely has every available right to exist. This is not only it's not simply a series of imaginary lines in the dirt. This is a culture of human souls who continue to exist and continue to live on their own terms and don't bother anybody in the face of hatred from quite literally, not emotionally and geographically, quite literally all directions. Israel is a tiny little strip of land in the desert that is totally surrounded by countries that want to bomb them into the fucking earth. Which is the reason why, if anybody wonders, that is the reason why Israel needs as much aid from the United States every year as it does. They're a tiny little... Look at Israel on a map. It's a tiny little strip of land, totally surrounded. And look at their neighbors. Look at the neighborhood that house is in. Okay? Their neighbors are not friendly. Okay, so... This is a culture that continues to exist in the face of opposition. And that is something that leftists utterly hate, is staying true to your own, not only having standards and having values, but actually staying true to your own standards and staying true to your own values. Because leftists don't have standards or values at all. You know? And so not only is this a society and a culture of people who has standards and lives up to them, they stay true to them. And they're willing to fight and possibly even die for their standards. And there's not a leftist alive who could claim that.
Yeah, that's for sure. And definitely not a leftist alive. I mean, there used to be leftists who had standards, but most of them are 6 feet under. Yeah. Yep. Now, with regards to the aid by the United States, I was reading recently in the Israeli press. There are some military analysts who tend to believe that the aid does more harm than good because it breeds corruption, like any other aid, because it's a government. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, and quite frankly, I don't care. It's a business that the Israeli government and the US government should solve. It's none of our concern. Now, with regards to that, we should mention, let's speak a little bit about the so-called right-wing anti-Semitism, which is not really right-wing to begin with, because it's collectivist hatred. And because it's collectivist hatred, it cannot be right-wing, which is the... right-wing thought starts from the individual and builds up from there. It can make collective judgments from time to time, but always starting from the individual.
There's no such thing as right-wing collectivism. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, basically. So, but let's, for the mainstream world, for the world that doesn't really study ideology, there is such thing, or study, fair enough. That's a very good point. So,
my women's studies degree.
Let's not ruin this video. Anyway, so the so-called right-wing hatred of Jews usually starts from various premises, such as that, you know, most influential leftists during the overall or during the last 150 years were Jews, which is true. A significant chunk of the initial members of the Politburo, for instance, the Soviet Union, were Jews. A significant chunk of the Frankfurt School that created cultural Marxism that ruins our societies today were Jews. Admittedly, not all of them. Bela Kun was Hungarian, Antonio Gramsci was Italian, but most of them were indeed Jewish. However, I seem to remember, I made an interview once with an Israeli Zionist journalist. His name is Gil Rönnen. You probably read his work, but you know, I made an interview with him for a project of ours, but that eventually flopped. But that's a different story. At the end of that interview, he told me something that I'll probably remember. In the interview, and the interview is available somewhere on YouTube. It's basically the interview that I made when we founded AVFM Israel or AVFM Hebrew. The project flopped entirely, but that's a different story. In the interview, he told me something that I'll probably remember until I die. Wherever there's ideology, there's Jewish people. And I started looking around, and he's right. I mean, there's Jewish people in National Socialist thought.
That is true.
There is Jewish people... crap. Economic conservatism is almost entirely Jews. I mean, Hayek was a Jew, Friedman was a Jew, left-wing, so-called left libertarianism is mostly Jewish. I mean, if you ask them to list their thinkers, at least half of them were Jews. So wherever you look on the spectrum, whether it's authoritarian, libertarian, left or right, center, whatever, there is at least one, and usually a lot more than one, Jewish thinker who was at least part of the founding of that school of thought, if not actually the founder of the school of thought. So wherever there's ideology, there's Jewish people. Now, what these so-called right-wingers who hate Jews don't seem to understand is that it's not just Jewish leftists. I mean, even in their own schools of thought, there's Jews. There are Jewish people, and it seems to me that these kinds of people tend to be bothered about they tend to be bothered about the Jewish overrepresentation in ideology. And there is some truth in that. Indeed, Jews are overrepresented in politics. But what is the thought process in your opinion? Because I have been unable to understand until now, and I still haven't figured it out, and probably won't figure it out for at least another few months. Why should this be a problem? Yes, Jews are overrepresented in politics. So bloody what?
I think that part of it, I mean, again, I know because it's the first time I'm hearing this question. I mean, I'm sure that if I were to spend another several years thinking about it, I could probably come up with a really good answer, or maybe not a really good answer, you know, an acceptable answer for you.
Well, we sat around here trying to understand Jew hatred, so you had to expect.
I think that possibly one very, very significant contributing factor to leftist hatred against Jewish dominance in places of intellectual thought, you know, regardless of where they place on the spectrum, you know, just Jewish dominance. I think that a lot of the late leftist hatred against that is actually has its origins in human tribalism, because we evolved to be a tribal species. Like, the human brain only evolved to be able to handle up to around, I think I've seen different numbers bandied around on the internet, but like the average number seems to be around 120 to 150 people, you know, within one tribe. Like, that's the number of social connections that a human brain evolved to be able to handle. And I think that for a chimpanzee, it's somewhere around like 60, 70, maybe 80 total social connections. And in each case of chimpanzees and Homo sapiens, once one particular tribe starts getting too high above the number, because again, I've seen different numbers bandied around on the internet and bandied around in different studies in different academic presses written by different academicians, but whatever the number is, and it probably is very fluid anyway, because the human brain is a mushy, squishy piece of meat, you know. So, but once a particular tribe, you know, and the number of members of that tribe starts getting too high above the human brain's evolutionary limit on how many connections it can manage, then that particular tribe actually fractures, and it breaks out into war and violence, and it separates into smaller tribes. And I think that actually, I don't know how much this has to do with anti-Jew hatred, but I think that one of the reasons for that is because the human brain is on a multiple collective scale trying to bring its own number of connections back down to a manageable level, a manageable number. So if you have tribe A and tribe B, and tribe A is, let's say, 70 people, tribe B is 100 people, and so tribe B occupies tribe A, then tribe A is going to feel threatened. You know, like maybe they'll feel as though they, they're being overrun by numbers or over dominated by presence, which, you know, I mean, there might be truth to that. But the human brain may still, and again, I don't have a degree in this shit, so don't, don't put too much faith in what I say. But the human brain may perceive that as a threat, like a direct threat to themselves, because we evolved, number one, survive, and then number two, reproduce. And then everything else comes after that. And so, if the human tribalistic brain, and this is actually another thing that might tie into it, because leftism is automatically, by definition, collectivist. That means that, and now I'm going to get a lot of hatred on Facebook and the YouTube comments, the leftist brain is not evolved enough to be able to handle the differentiation between itself and whatever's not itself, which is, again, maybe not the reason, but a contributing factor toward why leftists are so often automatically collectivists.
There have been studies actually that sort of proved that there is a fundamental biological difference that may predict with quite a high degree of accuracy whether that particular person will end up being a conservative or a collectivist or a leftist. Apparently it has something to do with the R/K types of survival. Basically, the humans evolved to use the K strategy, which is longer. Well, it's a lot to explain, but the base. Yeah, the basis is basically that in the with the K, and I hope I'm getting this right. If not, I'm going to have to amend it. But with the K strategy is family unit, longer tenderness for the offspring, high investment into the social institutions, and whereas the R strategy is more hedonistic, more leftist, basically. And apparently there are ways to look into one's biology and predict with a certain degree of accuracy whether that person will lean towards an reproductive R type of strategy, whether or whether a K type, and that usually correlates with wider political thought. Now, admittedly, it's not a perfect indicator, like nothing in nature, yes. But nevertheless, it seems that there is a way. I mean, saying that the leftist brain is not wired to make some differences or to understand certain things is not necessarily that far-fetched as it may seem at a first glance. Now, admittedly, we have our own imperfections, but we'll let the leftists understand those. I sincerely doubt that they'll be able to, but anyway. But what is very interesting, and I think I understand your tribalism point, but what is very interesting is that when you get down to the brass tacks of it, the Jews are not a monolithic group. I mean, yes, they're overrepresented in politics, but they're not overrepresented in the same political party or in the same movement. Yes, they're overrepresented, let's say, in acting, but then again, they're not overrepresented in the same company, but either in all of them or in competing terms. Not all Jews believe the same thing. I mean, I think it was Ben Shapiro who made the breakdown and explained why certain Jews vote leftist and why certain Jews do not vote leftist. And apparently it has something to do with practicing their religion. Non-practicing Jews, basically Jews that are ethnically Jewish but not religiously Judaic, tend to vote leftist, whereas those who actually practice the Judaic faith tend to vote conservative. So, Jews, by any account, they're not a monolithic group. And what is interesting about the so-called right-wing hatred of Jews, which again is not right-wing at all, but what is interesting is that these people, just like the leftists they claim to despise, don't seem to understand that. Because again, if there had been any Jewish conspiracy against anyone, well, we wouldn't see the exact same problems that we have in Europe panning out in Israel. I mean, there is such thing as gender studies in Israel, and there is such thing as cultural Marxist bollocks in Israel. Heck, there is such thing as the anti-Zionist press and the liberal media in Israel. And Haaretz, for crying out loud. I mean, Haaretz is basically the Guardian in Israel. And they spend their entire existence, day in and day out, writing about why Israel should lower its defenses, why Israel should allow just as many peace-loving religion of special needs followers get into Israel whenever they please and do whatever they like, why the IDF is evil and whatnot, and so on and so forth. So Israel has the exact same problems that we have, basically, on this continent. So considering these facts, and of course considering the fact that Jews generally don't bother the rest of us, why I just don't seem to understand, and I'm going to spend a lot of time thinking about this, but why there is such thing? I mean, I can understand why leftists hate the Jews, because they're collectivists, and it threatens their collective and their way of thinking. But why are there people who define themselves as non-leftists and yet still apply leftist standards to Jews and basically hate them all in one fell swoop? I just don't understand.
I don't have an answer to that.
Too bad. Because I'm trying to figure it out, because no matter what school of thought you're adhering to, there has to be at least one Jew that influenced your school of thought. No matter, and if you're adhering to a school of thought that is very far away from left-wing schools of thought, there's actually completely pertinent arguments to support Israel. There's completely pertinent arguments to at least stay away from Jew hatred. Now again, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think everyone should like the Jews. I think there are...
Do whatever you want. Have whatever opinions you...
Yeah, and because of that, let me bring this point out. Because I've met individuals who, upon further questioning, they eventually reveal that they don't actually hate the Jews, but rather hate the Jewish lobby. And as far as I'm concerned, they have a point.
The Jewish lobby at Washington D.C., okay, the political lobby, those guys are motherfuckers. Like, just I have absolutely no love or respect or fondness for those motherfuckers at all. Like, not in any form. The political lobby at Washington D.C. are just a bunch of piece of shit motherfuckers. That's, yeah.
Yeah, a few months ago, probably a year ago now, I made a video called "The Jewish Lobby is Mental." Links in the low bar, one moment the Israeli embassy and the ADL and a few other individuals who are legitimately considered as being part of the Jewish lobby went in and basically raided in a metaphorical sense, the Norwegian authorities, because a Norwegian guy ordered a credit card, I think, or a debit card, whatever, a personalized card which featured the Happy Merchant, which, yes, of course, is an anti-Semitic meme, but is this an appropriate use of resources, policing a random Norwegian guy who has a card with the Happy Merchant? I mean, really?
I don't have an explanation for those guys. The ADL and just the Washington D.C. lobby. I have no explanation or just I don't know. I have nothing to say. I have nothing more to say about them. They're motherfuckers.
What I would say is that these kinds of people, their existence makes things worse for the wider Jewish community, because I suspect, and I could be wrong, and I'll be like to be proven wrong, although I don't think I'm wrong this time, I suspect that a lot of the so-called right-wing Jewish hatred actually is not a hatred of Jews, but rather a hatred of the Jewish lobby, and is further accelerated or further enhanced or further augmented by the actions of such organizations. Another example is the ADL genuinely thinking that using the echo the echo symbol, like in Freedom Alternative. Using the ADL genuinely thinks that that's an anti-Semitic thing, and barely using the echo is anti-Semitic in and of itself, period. And the Guardian believes that.
They took the bait. They actually took the bait. That wasn't even like top tier bait. That was low quality 8-bit shit. And they took it. They took the fucking bait. Like, they actually goddamn took the bait. It's astounding to me.
Yeah, and it seems to me that these kinds of organizations, another organization, I don't think it even exists anymore, called GIDF, the Jewish Internet Defense League, Defense Force. It used to exist. I don't know if it exists anymore. It was an online hacktivist group that basically followed everyone on the internet that said anything anti-Semitic. Now, sometimes the individuals they were targeting were genuinely anti-Semites.
Legitimately did hate Jewish people.
Yes, but others were not. Well, some of them were basically just fools tooling around with
Edge posting.
Yes, and sometimes were actually people who asked legitimate questions, such as why do we have to care what the ADL has to say? And the answer is we shouldn't. We shouldn't give a flying toss about what those cucks are saying.
I haven't actually listened to them in years.
Yeah, I haven't listened to them ever, so I take pride in never falling for their bait. Most of the times, it seems to me, and again, why should there be, another aspect that actually does enhance not necessarily Jewish anti-Jewish hatred or Jew hatred, but rather enhances a disdain for what people might perceive as Jewish organizations, and sometimes they are indeed Jewish organizations, sometimes they're not, is the existence of these kinds of Holocaust laws. I mean, most of the edgy quote-unquote alt-right kids on the internet who use memes of the happy merchant and refer to the Holocaust as the Holo-hoax and whatnot, most of those kids, if you start asking, poking them with questions, they're not actually either Holocaust denialists or anti-Semites or anything. I mean, some of them don't even care about the Holocaust, period. No, they're actually like, well, this is a taboo for everyone else, so I'm going to provoke them with this, because this is something that it works.
It's the same idea behind punk music and...
Yeah, I mean, when I want to troll somebody and I want to trigger them, I try whatever I think it may work. So, if I'm trolling, let's say, a feminist woman, then I'm not going to troll her with mathematics, because she doesn't understand because she definitely doesn't understand mathematics. But I am going to troll her with quotes from the Bible and why she should obey her husband and what, because that's what triggers her. Same goes with the edgy kids when they troll journalists. Whenever they troll Jewish journalists, they troll them with anti-Semitic memes because they want to troll the journalist, not because they're anti-Semites themselves. Because if you look around, the same individual trolls other people with other memes. Whatever works. But
just something to get a response.
Yeah, just something to trigger a reaction. And it seems to me that the Jewish lobby doesn't see that. The Jewish lobby is unable to comprehend that there is a difference between edge posting and actual hatred. And another aspect that is dangerous, at least in Europe, not in this country, but in most countries of Europe, is that neither does the law. I mean, I'm sure you're aware there are plenty of countries, most of them in Europe, that have on the books so-called Holocaust denial laws that sometimes they don't actually apply just to Holocaust denial, but it applies they apply to pretty much anything. And once you have those kinds of laws in the books for long enough, and once you have enough people arrested based on those laws, you're going to create an actual hatred, yes, because whilst I disagree, I do understand where some of the so-called right-wing Jew hatred comes from, because they're like, hold on a second, why are these motherfuckers such a protected class that there is a law specifically for them to protect their feelings from criticism? And I guess they do have a point when they say that. Now, I think, Holocaust denialism, I think it's retarded, and I think it is an appalling idea to try to deny Holocaust, that the Holocaust happened. But nevertheless, I think denying the Holocaust should be legal. Completely legal. And I think, questioning how many victims and what, all of that should be legal. For the simple reason that when you make it illegal, it becomes something that is happening in the underground, and it becomes actually far more radical than when it is out in the open. That's why, for instance, I would never ban leftism, I would never ban feminism, I would never ban any of that, no matter how disdainful I may think they are, and I do. But it's better if they're out in the open. So, I don't know, what do you think? I mean, I genuinely think that the existence of such laws and the existence of such organizations that are busy policing petty nonsense, basically, actually creates more Jewish hatred and makes things worse than they would have otherwise been had these laws and policies and organizations not existed.
It's the same idea behind prohibition. Like back in the, for the 5 people in the world who don't know, in the early part of the 1900s, in the United States, they banned alcohol. Banned all alcohol.
All sales.
Through a constitutional amendment.
Yep.
Through, they banned sales, ownership, manufacturing, buying. They just banned alcohol in all forms. And I think the ban lasted like 6 years. 6-7 years. It was like this long. And of course, what happened when they banned alcohol? People started making it in their bathtubs and selling it in bottles, and shitloads of people died from drinking tainted or highly, highly toxic alcohol. And who was the only group of people who continued to make money? Was the mafia. Any time that you try to drive something underground or make it illegal or ban it or whatever, people are still going to do it. Like this isn't really related, but in Iran, satellites are, satellite dishes are officially technically illegal. Everybody has one. Absolutely everyone. And they have it out in their yard, and they just cover it, like they'll put up 2 sticks, on either side of the satellite dish. Well, usually on the entire roof, so that, it's not really obvious. It's like, oh, why is there a sheet of cloth over that one specific part of their backyard? Like what? It's over the whole thing. So, it's like, oh no, it's for shade in the sun, which in Iran is having shade is a very legitimate concern. Technically, premarital sex is totally illegal in
That's
Iran.
why every Iranian chick has a boyfriend or multiple boyfriends, because it's illegal.
Yeah, of course. Because, humans naturally, instinctively follow, legislation that's written on stamped pieces of paper. That's totally something that humans do.
Back in communism, we had this joke, what is a law? And the answer is, the law is a rumor unanimously passed by the National Assembly, by the Great National Assembly. Making it illegal doesn't work. Anyway, sorry for interruption.
No, yeah, it's just, it's the idea of, prohibition. And making some, in states, in the United States of America, where they had completely banned any and all, sex education in schools. They had completely banned, different things that are of sexual nature, especially anything that is between even 2 people who are under 18, like a 15-year-old and a 16-year-old. In those particular states, the statistical rates of not only teen pregnancy but also STDs are massively higher than they are in states where there are no laws regarding those. And this goes back to the whole idea of prohibition. Like, saying something is evil and saying that something is completely forbidden and cannot be allowed and is utterly, you know, out of the question and whatever, naturally people are going to gravitate toward that somehow, in some way. There's going to be a pushback to it. Lately, I've actually been wondering if there's any. I'm fairly sure that there probably is. If there's any extent of a BDSM culture in Islamic countries, I wonder how populous that is. But
BDSM culture is very active in Pakistan. Yes, and in Afghanistan, in addition to the Barkabazi practice, which, let's face it, predates Islam, Islam just incorporated it because the practice is older than Islam and older than Christianity, actually. But anyway, in addition to that, there is also a BDSM scene. Now you can Google that shit. It's very hard to find articles that are not in Arabic, but they do exist. And well, admittedly, and that's very weird. There are very few articles in English about it, but there's plenty of articles in Russian because, well, what's the second language of Afghanistan? It's Russian. So you know, there's quite a lot of articles in Russian about the BDSM scene in Afghanistan. So yeah, and because it is forbidden, just like. Let's get closer in Europe. For instance, in Sweden, if you want to buy alcohol, you can only do it from the state monopoly, which tends to be closed during weekends, which is most of the time when most people actually buy alcohol, because the rest of the time they go to work. And it's very expensive, overly taxed in an effort to curb the alcoholism rate in Sweden. Now, surprise, surprise, 20 or 30 years into that monopoly, let's compare it with Romania. In Romania, there is no limit on alcohol. If I want to buy today a truckload full of Jack Daniel's whiskey, yeah, all I need is the money and a working phone connection to order it, and that's it. And in the same day, a truck full of whiskey will park in front of my backyard, and I can just unload it and start drinking it if I want to. There's no limit for that, and it's not overly taxed. It is taxed, but it's not overtaxed. And of course, if I want to buy alcohol at 3 a.m. in the morning, I can buy alcohol at 3 a.m. in the morning. Now, surprise, surprise, and of course, manufacturing alcohol at home is not only completely legal, but if you manufacture under a certain amount, and that amount is usually high, for instance, with wine is like 300 or 400 liters per year. So if you manufacture under a certain amount, the state doesn't even care what you put in it. As long as you drink it, who cares? So compare this to Sweden, where you're not allowed to do any of that. There are fewer alcoholics per capita in this country than in Sweden. The same, and I presume this is your contention, the same is true with Jew hatred. If you try to police anything that sounds like Jew hatred, because that's the extent to which these kinds of regulations go. For instance, in Austria, anything that even remotely might possibly sound like anti-Semitism or Nazi glorification and whatnot, even if it isn't actually that, can get you in jail. I mean, there is a guy, now admittedly that guy is a notorious Holocaust denialist, but nevertheless he served time in Austria for what he might say, because he didn't actually say anything whilst he was in Austria. I mean, they arrested him when he landed in Vienna because he was attending a conference, and they feared that he might say something that was illegal according to their laws. So once you get to that level of retardation in the law, I think that's the moment, and I think it is no surprise that most of the National Socialist, or well, their name today is identitarian, but it's still basically fascism. Yeah, well, you don't know even 10% of it. The identitarians basically are political correctness for white people. Basically, I mean, it's not white nationalism. It's politically correctness for white people. That's what they are. Anyway, if you look at their school of thought, most of their thinkers originate from Austria, from Germany, from places where there is, I mean, the most anti-Semitic of them, at least, are from places where there is the highest amount of of legislation and policies and organizations that try to police that. If you look in their school of thought, whenever they receive members that are not from a country with extreme legislation on this topic, those new members tend to be far less anti-Semitic. So at least there is a correlation. Now, I don't necessarily claim that there is a causal link there, but considering that we know that what's forbidden tends to be perceived as beautiful. In fact, in Romanian we actually have a proverb, "Ce interzice frumos," what is forbidden is beautiful. Considering this, there might actually be a causal link there somewhere. Now the question is, can that be in any way amended? I mean, how do you make the case in a Senate hearing in Germany or in Austria for legalizing Jew hatred? Because I suspect that once these kinds of policies are gone, there will be far fewer people willing to swallow anti-Semitic narratives. But how do you make the case for that?
The only connection I can think of to make, at least vocal Jew hatred legal, to legalize vocal Jew hatred, is basically just to connect it to the Muslim waves, because they hate Jews more than anybody. So like, if vocal Jew hatred, anti-Jew hatred is illegal, then that means that 99.999999975% of all these Muslim refugees who are coming into Europe are now, well, they're already criminals to begin with, but, are double criminals even by local standards. That's the only connection that I can make. I can't think of anything else.
Yeah, well, here's another interesting aspect. Most of these laws don't seem to apply to Muslim refugees, don't they? I mean, they're willing to prosecute. In Germany, they raid people's homes whenever they dare to question the mass immigration policy of the Bundestag and the German government. Yet, I have yet to read, and the German viewers can correct me if I'm wrong, but I have yet to read of a raid of the German police of a mosque or a madrasa. Now, they recently raided a mosque, indeed, on suspicions of terrorism, and lo and behold, they found 2 trucks of weapons. I know it's shocking, but I have yet to read of a raid by the German police of a mosque or a madrasa on suspicions of anti-Semitic activity, which is very interesting considering that there is no such thing as a madrasa without anti-Semitism. I mean, it's really that simple. You can't have a madrasa without anti-Semitism.
Directly in the Quran, it says that Jews are the descendants of apes and pigs. And it also says to never take, for Muslims, to never take friends among Jews and Christians, because they are the worst and dirtiest of animals. It's in the book, so you don't. There's no conspiracy theory makeup or what do you call it? Conjecture or theorization. Just read the book, read the Quran. The anti-Jew hatred is right there, and you don't have to wonder. And yeah, I've never heard not only of raids of mosques based on anti-Semitic suspicion. That is just not even to be considered. But even talk, chatter among German politicians of even considering the idea. I've never even heard that. Now, granted, I can't speak German, so I can't read their press. But yeah, if any Germans who are watching this knows of such an instance, yeah, please post it in the comments. We'd like to see it. Yeah, I've never seen it.
And it's not just Germany. I mean, I gave the example of Germany because there's just too many bloody Muslims in Germany, and I would suspect that because they're numerous, at least once the question would have popped up. And at some point, yeah. But the same is true in Austria. The same is true in France. The same is true everywhere. There is some sort of legislation that allegedly makes anti-Semitism a felony, a crime. This has never happened. Yet for some reason, it is good enough to convict 17-year-old kids who posted the Happy Merchant or things of that nature. And this kind of, especially the double standard that is applied, further reinforces the idea, especially amongst individuals who are of, I don't know how to put it, feeble-minded, maybe, amongst those who are who easily tend to believe crackpot theories to begin with, and there are people who would genuinely tend to believe a lot of shit if you deliver them in a nice package. And if you deliver them in this package, I mean, look, our leaders have made Jews a special class. Look at these cases, how these kids have been mistreated by the judicial system based on this crackpot law, whereas these people who tend to be, they tend to commit more crimes, let's put it this way, about the religion of special needs. These people are completely immune to the same law. That kind of double standard, on top of the generalized stupidity and mentalness of the Jewish lobby, these two facts alone can make the case for a slow person to enhance Jew hatred, because the double standard is annoying, and that's why I genuinely think that these kinds of laws should go away. Now, what's very interesting that is whenever I make the case for this kind of position, I get flack from both the leftists who don't miss a chance to virtue signal all over the place.
It's like clockwork.
Yeah.
The train is never late.
Yep, and also from the conservatives. And it is true that certain conservatives seem to have a special blind spot for Jews, in the sense that they love Jews so much that they're willing to excuse anything as long as they perceive that that's for the benefit of Jews. And the thing is that Jews don't actually think that. I mean, Jews generally don't care if someone is being anti-Semitic on Twitter. They're like, yeah, whatever. We live in an anti-Semitic neighborhood of countries, for crying out loud. A 15-year-old posting the Happy Merchant on Twitter is the least of anyone's concern, Jewish or non-Jewish.
Like, every day, totally innocent Israeli civilians are at the very minimum just high risk of being bombed, and then stabbed, shot, beaten, bombed from above, bombed from, and so like, I think that at least, especially Jews from Israel have basically kind of come to think that, like, being called hurtful names on the internet is really not that big of a concern. And I think that the Jewish lobby in Washington D.C., I don't think they not only that they understand the idea, but I don't think that they're even aware of it. I don't think they even know.
I don't think... I think you're wrong on this one. I think they know. But they're so deep into their own righteousness and righteous indignation.
They can't give up their own narrative, because then that would show them that they were wrong.
Yeah, I genuinely think so. Because, people from the ADL were... it has been explained to them at least 100,000 times, if not more. Look, it's not really an issue if someone orders a credit card with a Happy Merchant on it. It's not. It's really not. I mean, it has been explained to them by Jews and non-Jews and by Israeli citizens and by everyone else. They know the reasoning. They just don't seem to be capable to accept it. Now, admittedly, this could also be the case. I mean, there have been a lot of people who dropped out from working for the ADL precisely for this reason. So there may be some sort of a self-selection there. That is to say, only the people who still buy into the narrative continue to work there or to do work for them. So that may be the case indeed. But nevertheless, the Jewish lobby that is mental, they know, at least they as individuals, they know what our position is. They just don't think they just don't think it's right. They think that it is indeed their duty to police any sort of behavior, and they usually justify it to themselves because that's how we prevent a new Holocaust. Whereas when I hear that, I'm like, dude, you better start focusing on mass Islamic immigration if you actually want to prevent a new Holocaust. Because
Muslims really will kill you.
yeah, I mean, the New York Times is all up in arms. Oh my God, anti-Semitism is on the rise in Europe. Well, that's true, but have you happened to take a look on the identities of the ones of
Who the anti-Semites are.
basically, yes, because it's not neo-Nazis. In fact, most modern neo-Nazis don't have an opinion about Jews, period. They tend to be busy with non-white people, period. So if you want to curb anti-Semitism, maybe curbing mass Islamic immigration, maybe, just maybe, would help. Just saying.
I don't have anything to add.
Yeah, well, I guess we can. Oh my God, we've been up for at least over an hour. So yeah, I think we've covered quite a lot of territory, I would say. I guess this leaves me with quite a lot of thoughts and probably with more answers, more questions than answers. But then again, that's not really a surprise. The purpose of these videos is precisely to bounce ideas around, not to actually reach a conclusion. Now, I presume that we will get quite a lot of flack for this video from all sorts of people. So yeah, bring in all the hate into the comment section. I promise not to delete comments.
We're not like leftists where we'll censor opinions that we disagree with.
Yeah, we might
Disagree with us all you want.
Yeah, we might curse back if you curse at us, but that's the worst thing we'll do. But nevertheless, the purpose of these videos is not to necessarily reach a conclusion, but just to bounce ideas around. Now, mind you, I'm Romanian and he's of Persian heritage. We're not Jews. So, feel free to call us. I don't know, what's the latest insult for non-Jews who like Jews?
Well, I guess we'll find out soon enough. It's kind of interesting for me because, like, honestly, years ago, I actually used to hate Israel too, and what made me, what changed my mind was, I looked into it, and long story. I don't know. Can we get into anecdote time? Okay, so the way that
It's you who is under pressure of the time, not me.
No, yeah, whatever. No, that guy's usually late anyway. Anyway, so back in the day, years ago, I used to hate Israel, and the reason why was because of all of the news that I saw in BBC, CNN, NBC, ABC. That's right, MSLSD, CBC, a bunch of these, reliable sources, okay, and of course they would show all these stories, and in newspapers too, like the Globe and Mail, the New York Times, the whatever, etc., fill in the blank. They would show stories. And it's usually in newspaper stories of Israeli aggression against Palestine. That's the usual talking points. And for a long time I believed it because, in North America, you can't very well just, pay $1.20 and then get on the bus number 275 and go to Palestine and see for yourself. You can't do that. And so you basically have to go off of the BBC, CNN, ABC, the Globe and Mail, New York Times, etc., blah blah blah, etc., etc. And so when you see all of these stories, and I guess that is actually literally what they are. They're fucking tall tales. They're stories of Israeli aggression against Palestine. You have no way of checking it, and so you believe it. You know, I believed it. I used to believe it. I believed it for a long time. And the way that it finally changed was I came across a particular story, and I can't even remember what story it was, but it was it was some like dead children supposedly in Gaza, and so previously a friend of mine back in the United States, who is now living in Oregon, but at the time lived in Los Angeles, she had told me about this program called Tin Eye, like Tin Eye, and so what that is, which now we can just use Google Images for a reverse search, but back during this time, Google hadn't introduced their search by image, because nowadays you can look up a word and it'll show you a bunch of images, but now you can also upload an image and it'll show you every instance of that image on the internet. And Google's a lot better at this than Tin Eye is. But back during that time, Tin Eye was not the only. It was the best. It was the best program, the best function to be able to do it. And so I wrote to her, my friend back in the United States, and I asked her, what was that program that you told me about that can search by image? And she told me Tin Eye. And so I uploaded that picture of the dead children that were killed by Israeli missiles or blah whatever. And I was trying to get back to the earliest possible source, because like news will change, like person kills 3 people, whatever, and then another news organization will pick that up and they'll say person kills crowd, and then another news story, and it'll just grow from there. And so I'm trying to go back to the earliest possible instance of that image. And lo and behold, it wasn't even Israeli or Palestinian. It wasn't even from there. It was from Syria. And it was it was the result of Syrian aggression against Syrian civilians. And I was shocked. I was really, really shocked. And but I couldn't disagree with it, because a computer does not think in terms of emotion. All it does is just process numbers. It just adds and subtracts and runs through data algorithms and finds like, okay, here's the answer. It's like, what's 7 times 6 plus 5? It's 47. There, done. That's the answer. Like, but I don't feel like it's 47. Well, too bad. Yeah. And so then I started doing this with a lot of other images of, again, Israeli hatred, or no, Israeli aggression against Palestine, and I started finding that really a lot of them, a lot of the images that we see in the news are actually stolen images, and a fairly decent majority of those images, of those the stolen ones, of the stolen images, are from Syria. Now, obviously, they're from a lot of other parts of the world too. A lot of other places around the world. I remember one that was, bandied about by the news again, of being about Palestinians protesting against Israeli police, and I went and I looked for it, and it turned out to be a protest of students in Buenos Aires, Argentina, against the government for raising tuition rates. it gets better, man. There was one, I remember, I'll never fucking forget this. There was one of Palestinians posting this picture of a building that had like a giant section of it, crashed in. And so Palestinians had shown that. It's like, oh my god, look at how Israelis are firing missiles at us and they're destroying our buildings and blah, etc., whatever. I looked that up. And I confirmed this with the USG, the United States Geological Survey. Not only was it not a building that was, not only was it not a building that was smashed in by Israeli missiles, not only was it not even in the Middle East, it was a building in Santiago, Chile, that had been crushed in by an earthquake. Because you know how Chile is on the western side of South America, so they're on the same ridge that we are in California, the Pacific Rim ridge. And so it was an earthquake in Santiago, Chile, and the building had smashed in, and Palestinians couldn't, borrowed that image. And it was like, oh my god, look at how Israelis are firing missiles on us, like, and the list just goes on
but
and
the
on.
Jews control the earthquakes.
Oh, right, yeah, that's right. The Jews, yeah. How could I possibly forget? The, what is it? I really got to get up on my my Jew news, because I'm being oppressed. I'm being systematically oppressed here by our Jewish overlords. It's so. Then there was a bunch of other pictures that were not stolen, and initially, at first, I believed those two. What is it? Then I came across an image, and it's another thing. The same friend who lives in the United States and now, today, currently lives in Oregon. She had told me, a couple of years prior to that, about this program called photoforensics, which is where you can test for, for photoshopping and changes to the image. And so, at one point, I came across a particular photo. I remember which photo this was. It was of an IDF soldier abusing a Palestinian boy. The Palestinian boy was over like this. And, of course, this was taken as being like, look at how the IDF abuses innocent children, whatever, all this other shit. And I could not find that as a stolen image. And so I thought, okay, you got me there. And then I looked a little closer at the photo. And I noticed that this little Palestinian boy, didn't have a shadow. And I thought that was interesting, when everybody else in the picture had a shadow. And actually, the IDF soldier, his shadow was facing in the other direction. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And so...
But then again, the IDF soldier was a Jew, and Jews can bend shadows.
Right.
I mean, they can do everything, man.
If any of our reptilian space lizard overlord Jew masters are watching this, can you please teach me how to do it? Because I want to sneak into women's lockers and, just enjoy. Anyway. What is it? I noticed that, and I'm thinking, like, okay, fine, they probably did not film, season 7 of Twilight in Palestine, most likely. So I went back to my friend in the United States, and I asked her, hey, what was that program again that you told me about where you can look for photoshopping? And she said photoforensics. And so I went and found that, and I think I must have spent like a good 2 months of my life, like 2-3 hours, sometimes 4 hours a day, every day, for like a month and a half, 2 months, something like that, just practicing, using the site. And first I started off with pictures that I knew perfectly well were not Photoshopped, because at the time I didn't know sweet diddly fuck all about Photoshop. I don't know how to use that shit. I literally just took pictures that I had taken with my little, 8-bit camera. Well, there's no such thing as an 8-bit camera. Whatever. One of those rocks. Like one of these, this lighter, a camera that's like that, one of those. And so, photos that I had taken myself with my little electric rock and uploaded those to photo forensics. I looked at them the way that they look under the image analysis. And then I started sending a bunch of them to another friend of mine who lives in Poland. This guy who is just one of the nerdiest computer nuts that I know. And I asked him, hey man, can you just change these photos for me? Can you Photoshop them? And he said, sure, what do you want? I said, I don't care. Just change them. Do shit. And in fact, do shit multiple times, and then just mark in the file name which, how many times you've changed it. And he said, okay. And of course, he never goes outside, so he just starts photoshopping, tits and tits and tits and more tits, and I mean, not that I'm complaining, mind you, but he, once I got got these images back, then I started looking at uploading those to photo forensics and looking at them and see not only how to tell where something has been photoshopped, to see how much, or whether it's been smudged, or how many levels in, how many file saves in it was. Yeah. Right. And so basically just, I'm not an expert. I don't have a degree in this. I am not a master. I've just spent a solid amount of time learning how to use this program and learning how to identify things with material that I had uploaded myself. And then I spent another good while, scouring the internet for images that were very obviously photoshopped, a shark with missiles on the sides of it, and a velociraptor riding on top of the shark holding a pair of AK-47s, something very clearly photoshopped. And just running through that and then learning how to identify, when, how to read an analyzed image. And then after about a month and a half, 2 months or so, something like that, once I had gotten really good with, using the program and being able to identify it, then I started going back to, again, Israeli aggression against Palestine. Lots of them have been photoshopped. Lots of it. Lots of that imagery has been altered. And then after I found a good solid amount of that, I'm just okay, fine. And then I started finding images that were neither stolen nor photoshopped. And then I thought, okay, hey, you got me. And then I started noticing that, it's okay, where's the blood? And then I started looking at them, and there are just these inconsistencies of it's okay, somebody got shot multiple times and there's no blood on the ground, or things like that. And it's son of a bitch, these images were staged, of people actually making it up and acting, and faking the image and then posting the images online. And so
there is a reason we call it Pallywood. I mean, there was a time, and I don't think they're still out there, but you should look for them if there are. There was a time when one could easily find videos from during the staging process, and you would have footage from before the shooting, during the shooting, after the shooting. You would see the photographers coming in, shooting the bodies, taking photos of the bodies, and then after the dead were somehow resurrecting and moving on with their business.
Jesus Christ has returned, clearly. Yeah, and so then I started, after finding images that were stolen, usually, normally, typically from Syria, even though that's not the only source. It is a highly significant source. So, images that were stolen, images that were photoshopped, images and videos that were staged, that were acting, and then I started finding other ones that were neither stolen, they were neither stolen, photoshopped, nor staged. And then I thought, okay, hey, you got me. And then I noticed that, somewhere in the photo, there's writing in Hebrew, or there's print in Hebrew. Now, this is the one that I cannot confirm, because in order to confirm it, I would actually have to go there. Now, if anybody, and, I would be willing to take time out of my day to go there, because I do love Israel, and I would really like to spend some solid time there. If anybody can show me where it is in Palestine, okay, not Israel, in Palestine, where it is in Palestine where you can find in public print, writing, signs, billboards, street signs, whatever, where in Palestine you can find things that are printed in Hebrew, and then I will concede.
I suspect there aren't, although maybe in Gaza there may be one or two places. I would even suspect preserved specifically for staging videos and photos and whatnot. Because let's not forget, the Israelis have been in Gaza until 2005. So there's been a lot of time to build things with Hebrew inscriptions, Hebrew writing. Now, admittedly, 11 years have passed since then, and Hamas turned Gaza into a launching pad of Iranian rockets against Israeli civilians. And mind you, I say Israeli civilians and not Jews, because surprise, surprise, there is such thing as an Arab minority in Israel, and surprise, surprise, the only place in the Middle East where Arabs actually have rights is in Israel. Show me Arab women serving in the Supreme Court of any Arab country, and maybe I'll change my mind. Until then, there is such thing I think she died of old age. There was an Arab woman in the Israeli Supreme Court, and there are Arab women and men in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, which is again something that you can hardly find in Arab countries. I mean, there are women in the Pakistani parliament, but then again, Pakistani is not an Arab country. So
there is actually a Muslim Arab military general serving on the IDF, and he is loyal to Israel, and he's proven it through his actions. I think he was wounded multiple times while fighting against Islamic terrorist groups in defense of Israel. And the guy is a Muslim Arab military general serving for Israel and serving Israel.
Yeah, the thing is, and these are the kinds of aspects that those who practice anti-Zionism, which, as far as I'm concerned, is as far as I'm concerned, anti-Zionism is basically a code word for anti-Semitism. Period. It's just one cannot be an anti-Zionist and claim that he or she doesn't hate Jews. Now, admittedly, if you try this, the genuine haters, they're like, oh, but no, look at this Jew who hates Israel and whatnot. And I'm like, well,
that's evidence.
Yeah, how is that how does that prove anything? I mean, there were such thing as Negroes holding slaves legally in the United States. In fact, the first legal
first slave owner in the United States was a black man.
Yeah. So, just because there have been Negroes defending slavery does not change really anything of the whole narratives. Yeah. Same thing goes with, Jew hatred and Israeli hatred. Just because you can find one or two or even 100,000 Jews who hate Israel, that doesn't change the fact that quote unquote anti-Zionism is Jew hatred. So anyway, when it comes to Jew hatred, most of the individuals who practice anti-Zionism they don't seem to realize that Israel is not really. I mean, it is an ethno-state, but it is an ethno-state in the way that Poland or Romania is an ethno-state. That is to say, minorities exist and nobody is systematically murdering them or persecuting them. Yes, it is majority Jewish, but so fucking what? Norway is majority Norwegian. Does anyone think that non-Norwegians in Norway are being somehow persecuted? I don't think so. Italians are Italy is majority Italian. That doesn't mean that the non-Italian minorities that exist in Italy are being persecuted. Yet for some reason, the fact that Israel is majority Jewish, that's somehow evidence that non-Jews in Israel are being persecuted. Obviously, the second evidence is, oh my God, but there's a Star of David on the flag. Well, yeah, there is a cross on the Finnish flag, and
then there's a fucking moon and star on how many flags of how many Muslim countries?
Yeah. And mind you, not even there, it's not always the case that minorities are being persecuted. I mean, up until very recently, Turkey was a normal country. Now, admittedly, we have our own differences with the Turks, but nevertheless, it's a normal country.
Different conversation, different time.
Yeah, but nevertheless, so, not even having the moon on the flag is necessarily evidence of any sort of persecution. But for some reason, Israel is held to different standards. And when it comes to the so-called Israeli aggression against Palestine, usually when you pin the haters down to their position, when you hold them to their own standard in a discussion, they eventually end up basically saying that they hold Israel to a higher standard. And I'm like, well, but why? Why is Israel? I mean, they complain that Israel is considered special, and mind you, I don't consider Israel special. It's just a nice country, like Norway. It's a nice country, period. And as opposed to, I don't know, Pakistan, which is not a nice country. But for some reason, I mean, they complain that Israel is held up as being special. Yet they're the ones who treat Israel special. They hold Israel to a much higher standard. I mean, if there had been, because that's how I look at it. As far as I'm concerned, when it comes to the Israel-Palestine issue, is a choice between civilization and barbarism. I mean, yes, Israel is an imperfect civilization. Yes, it's an imperfect country. But then again, what country is perfect?
There's no such thing as perfection in this universe. It doesn't exist.
The universe itself is imperfect. So, yes, Israel has its flaws. Of course it has. Every country has its flaws. But when compared to its neighbors, well, I think I know if I have to choose where I want to have a vacation or conduct some business, I know the choice. And no, it's not Iran. Anyway, so but for some reason, I mean, if there had been knives attacks and bombs and whatnot on the territory of Romania every single day, like it is in Israel, rest assured that there will be army on the streets and the perpetrators ruthlessly prosecuted and very quickly. I mean, heck, we deported a Jordanian guy who has been a nice guy for 24 years, since 1991 till 2015. And in November 2015, he started going Allahu Akbar on social media. And it took 3 weeks for him to be deported and stripped of all his rights, and with a ban of 10 years in this country. All he did was to go Allahu Akbar on social media. If he had committed actual violence, I'm pretty sure that he would be dead by now. And I don't think anyone would ever blame my government or my country for protecting itself like that. Well, that's what Israel does too, except it does it on a much higher scale, because guess what? The threat is at a much higher scale. Yet for some reason, Israel is somehow special. Israel shouldn't defend itself. Everyone else is entitled to. And admittedly, and this is another argument that I routinely hear, because, unlike you, I actually follow Jew haters, because I want to understand their mentality. That's how I've gotten myself to some sort of an expert level in ideology. Because first, even today, I read religiously far left media. I read Salon, I read Slate, I read Democratic Underground, which is as far left as you can get in the West. So I actually read extremist websites all the time, and press and writing. I buy extremist books because I want to understand their mentality. So this year I somewhat dedicated most of the time dedicated to learning ideology. I dedicated it to reading Jew haters and listening to them. And one of the arguments of the Jew haters is that many of these so-called open borders activists happen to be Jews. Now, that's not exactly true. Indeed, again, they are overrepresented, but they're not the majority as the Jew haters would like to imply. And they say, well, wait, hold on a second. You want Israel to defend itself, but you want us to open our borders. And they're correct in pointing that one out. Where they're not correct is, one, they're not the majority. Most of the open borders activists are actually white people. We call them cucks for a good reason, but they're white people. Because the West is mostly white. And yes, indeed, there are more Jews than their percentage in the general population. But that is because Jews are generally overrepresented in any ideology. So, open borders, hashtag refugees welcome, all of that is an ideology. Just like libertarianism, just like Thatcherism, just like any other ideology. Now, from where we're standing is a criminal ideology, and an ideology that could legitimately bring down the destruction of Europe and Western civilization, but nevertheless it's an ideology. So of course there will be Jewish people in there. But apparently many individuals end up having at the very least a disdain for Jews because of that, because of this migration crisis isn't helping either. The thing is that I don't know how to make the case to these sorts of people, to make the case that not only their position is factually wrong, but the fact that there is such thing as Jews affected by the migration crisis, and there are quite a few of them. In Malmö, Sweden, for instance, most of the Jews have long gone from there because Malmö has become Islamized. The same is happening in France these days. The same is soon going to happen in Denmark. The same is all happening right now in Germany. Some of them have relatives in Israel, so they conduct what they say aliyah, which is basically returning to the homeland. Others they just move to another country, either United States or Eastern Europe or whatever, somewhere where there is no diversity and progress, and cultural enrichment in particular. So how do we make the case that the Jews are not the enemy? Because at the end of the day, Israel and Jews in general in the West or in Europe or whatever actually have the same problems that we have. Namely that we're deeply affected by mass Islamic immigration, we're deeply affected by the cultural subversion perpetrated by cultural Marxist ideologues, feminists, BLM, whatever. I mean, yeah. How do we make the case to these kinds of people that, well, worst case scenario, Jews are people who don't care. Most case scenario, Jews are people who have almost identical problems that we have in the West. And it's very rare that an individual who happens to be Jewish to be actually our enemy. Now, admittedly, there are Jews who believe fucked up shit. That's why I don't love Jews, as in collectively love Jews. No,
even then, that's like 20 people.
Yeah, they're probably more than 20, but they're not even remotely representative for the wider group. As opposed to, the adherence to the religion of peace. I'll refer all of you to the Pew Research Center polls that show that there's actually a sizable majority of adherents of religion of peace who are radical. So, how do we make that case?
I don't think we can, because when you have people...
I was afraid you were going to say that.
Yeah, I really don't, because if you have people who are so deeply committed to their religion, and religion is leftism, and collectivism, they're so deeply committed that they just cannot possibly come to accept that, okay, when there are there were, I think, 2,000 corpses as a result of Muslim attacks just during the Ramadan month, and just during Ramadan, and during the entire year, how many dead people? Maybe not even during the entire past 10 years, the whole decade from today back 10 years. How many people were killed as a result of Christian extremism, Jewish extremism, Buddhist extremism, Taoist extremism, Shinto extremism, pagan extremism, Santeria extremism, Yoruba extremism, and just plain guys from the fucking hills. You just look at the numbers, like...
Probably 1,000 for all 10 combined.
Right.
Probably.
Over the course of the past 10 years.
Yeah, there was a few years ago an attack of the Buddhists against Muslims, having been assaulted by the religion of peace for so many years. Eventually, a small community of Buddhists snapped out and paid back with the same currency. And I think they murdered around 250, 300 people in that attack. And there have been a few attacks in Israel by Orthodox Jews, and I think all of those combined claimed the lives of 20, maybe 30 people. Shintoists had a religiously motivated attack around 8 years ago that claimed the lives of, again, 20, maybe 30 people. So yeah, 1,000 victims tops for all 10... for all those 10 that you mentioned combined in the last... Over the past 10 years, yes.
Compared to just... compared to victims of Muslim violence not even just during 2017, just 16, during 2016. It's the current year. Current year intensifies. Not even just during 2016, during Ramadan 2016, just during Ramadan. And leftists are people, like, they can't even accept that. No, I don't think we can make a case for them. I really don't think we can.
I was afraid you were going to say that, and I'm also afraid that I agree, because if numbers have no meaning, then there is no basic line of reasoning to start from. Because in any debate, both parties have to at least accept, cold facts, like this is a sheet of paper. No, it's not the skin of an animal. No, it's a sheet of paper. The writing on this paper is black. No, it's not purple. It's not gray. It's not green. It's black. Basic facts. 2,000 people died during Ramadan 2016. It's a basic fact. It's no emotion involved there, no Islamophobia, no hatred, no nothing. It's a fact. It's just the way it is. But if one party utterly refuses to accept what's self-evident, then...
There is no reasoning with leftists.
Yeah.
They refuse to accept it.
Then the discussion cannot go on. Because, and that's the thing, because the leftists tend to think, just like they tend to think Jews are a monolithic group, and they're not. The same way they tend to think about, and this is pure projection on their behalf, they tend to think that conservatives are a monolithic group, when they're obviously... We disagreed with 3 different conservatives just during this video, so, and sometimes we disagree quite harshly with our fellow conservatives, but when we discuss our disagreements, we start from the basic facts, and at best we may discuss whether that particular fact has any relevance to the discussion or not, but we don't disregard it as, oh, that's a lie. No, we accept all the facts, and then the discussion is which facts are relevant to our discussion or not. For instance, is the fact that now there are 36 degrees Celsius in the courtyard that we're... Yeah, something like that, maybe 35. Is the fact that it's sunny weather and 35, 36 degrees Celsius in the courtyard we're filming this, is that relevant to our discussion? Well, we say no, but someone else may disagree. That's how usually a discussion amongst conservatives goes, whether a particular fact is relevant or not. But with leftists, most facts are not relevant, and even the facts that they think they're relevant, they're usually either not relevant, or they're right from the get-go poorly calculated. For instance, I can't think of an example the wage gap, but no, I was trying to come up with an example relevant to the Israel-Palestine thing. But let's stick with the wage gap. They think of the wage gap as being a fact, and that's a problem because it's not. And we as conservatives don't think of it as an irrelevant fact. We think of it as a lie because, well, hashtag numbers, how do they work? So because of that, I'm afraid I agree with you that I don't think we can have a conversation. And admittedly, there are Jew haters with whom we may have a conversation, but with hardline, hardcore, far left Jew haters, I don't think a conversation is possible. I mean, look at this, and we're going back so we can end the video within the same note that we started with the article from Heatst. There is a tweet cited there from @LauraBeej. It says, "Sorry to burst your Wonder Woman bubble. Gal Gadot is a racist. Gal Gadot is a racist. Gal Gadot is a racist. Gal Gadot is a Zionist. Hashtag no thanks." This is the kind of person with whom one cannot reason.
Keep your hate speech off this campus.
I mean, how do you reason with these kinds of people? And I don't think there is a way to reason with them. And because there is no way to reason with them, I suspect that my method of being just contemptuous and treating it with disdain in an effort to trigger an inner conscience, whether that exists or not, and some leftists...
For leftists, they have no concept of honor.
Yeah, but... They don't, indeed, but some leftists actually do, and increasingly more often these days, as the immigration crisis unfolds, we have seen a fair number of leftists starting to come around, usually either after some sort of a shock or after repeated contempt and ridicule from non-leftists. So I suspect that is the only option, if there is to be one, because otherwise, they just disregard anything. And again, applies not just to the Israel issue, or the so-called Jewish question. It applies to everything.
Numbers and facts in general.
Oh boy, I thought we were going to end this in a happy note. Okay, let's end it in a happy note. A Jewish guy usually was riding the metro to his workplace in Tel Aviv, reading the Jewish newspaper, and he had a workmate, a work colleague, who was an Arab, and of course the Arab was routinely reading the Arab language newspaper. And one day, so today, so tomorrow, so the day after tomorrow, but one day the Jewish guy hops into the metro reading the Arab newspaper. And he meets his Arab colleague again in the metro. And the Arab colleague is, "What's the matter with you?" And he's like, "Nothing, there's no problem." And he's like, "No, you're reading the Arab newspaper. Why is that?" And he's like, "Well, because the news are just better." I mean, really? The Arab editors are better or what? Well, no, but look at this. And he pulls off from his bag the Jewish newspaper. Look at this. Inflation is up, another terrorist attack, the government has discovered a new nest of corruption within the Knesset. I mean, there's tons of bad news. Now look at this, the Arab newspaper. The Jews run the world, the Jews run the banks, the Jews run
It's just better news, isn't it?
It's like, yeah, this is good news. Nice.
Right, so now that we have our funny moment, with all of that being said, thank you all for watching, and send all the curse and the agreements or the disagreements.
Hatred down below.
Yeah, hatred down below. I'll try my best when I edit this video to remember all the references we've made during this video, so I can include them in the links in the low bar so everyone can do their own research and reach to their own conclusions. I don't expect everyone to agree with us, but I do expect everyone to at least listen to what we have to say, not with an open mind, but at least to just to listen. I don't, because I don't like to say listen with an open mind, because that's usually how people who want to sell something express themselves. Yeah, and we're not into the business of selling anything, although it's all about the shekels for us, of course.
The shekels are pretty sweet, I must say.
Yeah, I can't really disagree with that. And of course, after I'm editing this video, I'm waiting for my payments from our reptilian Jewish overlords. So yeah, anyway. With all of that being said, thank you all for tuning in again to the Freedom Alternative, and I'll see you around. I don't know with what topic. Cheers!